Ho ho 7, festive greetings and welcome to SpyHards Podcast, where your hosts go merrily undercover into the world of spy movies to decipher which films make the naughty or nice list. But remember, this information is strictly for your ears only. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, and I did not sign off on this intro.
Well, it gets better. So this week we are not joined by one, but we are joined by two guests. Firstly, Cam, can you hear those Shay bells ring ding dingaling? It can only mean one thing. It is, of course, Shayla Miller. She's back.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. I've got my malt whiskey and branch water ready.
Hell yes. And joining her, for the first time hailing from the misty mountains of Scotland, he describes himself as more of a problem eliminator, and he is here to show us what's really under his kilt. It's Stephen Carty.
Evening, lads. Thank you for that sterling introduction. I am broadcasting from my rainy castle in Scotland. You might have seen it at the start of The World Is Not Enough. They rented it from my family.
Oh, do you have a portrait of former M's hanging on the wall?
All over the place. Dench is above my bed.
That's what I would expect.
That's a whole other story right there.
Bernard Lee in the bathroom, Dench above the bed. That's always the way it's got to go.
And you don't want to know where Robert Brown is.
Don't ask.
Don't
tell.
Perfect. Well, Shayla, firstly, welcome back to the show. You, of course, joined us for our Pierce Brosnan Roundtable, and we're bringing you back for more Bond, but this time, a different Bond.
A very different Bond, and a Bond that I don't give much love to. And that might have changed, but we'll find out.
Interesting. And
Yeah.
Stephen, your first time here, so we haven't really got to know you yet. Listeners haven't got to know you. So a couple of quick questions. I mean, obviously, you work for Radio Times, BBC Scotland, but going back to your sort of love of Bond and spy films, how did that get started?
Quite early. Just one night, my dad said, "Oh, Dr. No's on the TV. You'll like this. This is James Bond. You should watch this." I was way too young for it. Completely inappropriate for my dad to say you should be watching this. You know, big scary tarantulas and Bond gunning down an unarmed man. But I was really drawn into it really quickly. I must have been one of those sort of really disturbed, dark children that loved all that sort of stuff. And I didn't watch them in order over the years. I just think if you're of a certain age, I don't think any of you guys are as old as me, but back in the day, you know, Bond films were on TV all the time, and I just used to record them and then watch them over and over and over. And when I became a film critic, I actually had to distance myself from Bond. I stopped watching them for a few years because I'd watched them so many times they'd lost meaning. You know, when you watch something so many times, you know every word that's coming next. And it's almost like you've seen it too much that nothing matters anymore because you're so familiar with it. So I took 2-3 years away from Bond completely. And then at the start of lockdown, I watched them all again. Oh, it was magnificent. It was like watching them for the first time again, seeing Roger's eyebrow flex for the first time again. It was like a newborn eyebrow, and just revisiting them all was it was good and it was bad because there was films that I loved as a kid, and when I revisit them, some didn't hold up, and then some I had a new appreciation for. Like when I was young, I never really liked From Russia with Love or On Her Majesty's. But I think that's quite common for Bond fans, is that some films are maybe not suited to young kids. You know, when you're young, you want to see the big volcanoes and the cars with the magnets, and you want to see the piranhas, and you want to see all that stuff when you're young. And then I think when you get older, you maybe have an appreciation for the slower paced ones, like On Her Majesty's.
Yeah, like when I was a kid, Dr. No bored me to death. Like I was like, why would I be watching this one when I can watch Roger Moore face off against Jaws and Spy Who Loved Me? And now I love watching Bond walk through hallways. I don't know. It's aging, I guess.
Well, further on from that, obviously you said you walked away from Bond for a while, and now you've come back to it, and welcome back to the fold. But, who is your Bond?
Who's my Bond? It's Sean Connery. It has to be. And that's not an Edinburgh thing or a Scotland thing or even an age thing. It's just, I just think he's got everything. When I say he's got everything, that might be. Let me explain that a bit further. I think everyone has their own Bond, and their own Bond is measured by the actor who has the things that they personally look for. I think fans that potentially lean towards humour and fun and escapism, if you ask them who their Bond is, it's likely to be Roger Moore, I would imagine. If you ask someone who likes the Fleming novels and who wants something a bit darker and a bit grittier, chances are they'll say Timothy Dalton. And just for me, Connery's got all the stuff that I personally look for in a Bond, but there's none that I really hate. There's none that I don't like. There's none that I would say I don't enjoy watching. I think there's something there for everyone and for every occasion. If I'm feeling a bit flippant, I'll put on Roger. If I'm feeling a bit darker, I'll put on Dalton. But if you ask me Walter PPK to the head, who's my Bond? It's got to be. For me, it's Connery. Am I alone here? There was a lot of blank faces there. Am I the only one who likes Connery here?
No.
I love
always
Connery.
I always say my favorite is Roger Moore, but the best is Sean Connery.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably in the same boat, except I would say the best is Sean Connery. My favourite is Pierce Brosnan, but I think that's just because Brosnan was my first.
And that would be me as well. I'm the same as Scott.
Okay, so we're in a good team here. We seem to have got the full lineup, but there's one man we haven't really spoken about, and Cam, lead us in.
Yes, well, this week we are talking about On Her Majesty's Secret Service. There's no way around. Normally I have to sing with these intros, and this one, it had me stumped, Scott, until just now.
Why didn't you ask me? I could have come up with a tune for you or something. That was awful. We should take that again. That was terrible.
Why?
You could sing, "Do you know how Christmas trees are grown?"
Oh,
La
true,
la
true.
la 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 la.
Oh no, I want you to leave it in. It was just mostly to put you on the spot. But
Oh,
yeah,
I
that
see,
was
I see.
that was pretty bad. So thanks for that.
You're welcome, you're welcome. I like to keep the streak going of tone-deaf Bond song recreations.
Oh yeah, you've nailed it then.
Thank
Absolutely
you.
nailed it. But
Thank you.
okay, so we're tackling On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and it's about time we got around to it. I think what we'll do is we'll have the letterbox.com synopsis, and then we'll go to our past experiences with it.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are. On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Far up, far out, far more, James Bond 007 is back. James Bond tracks his arch nemesis, Ernst Blofeld, to a mountaintop retreat where he is training an army of beautiful, lethal women. Along the way, Bond falls for an Italian Contessa, Tracy Draco, and marries her in order to get closer to Blofeld.
There we have it.
Is that why he marries her? I don't think so.
That's not why he marries her, no.
That's strange. But okay, so I'll go last. I want to hear from, let's go from the way I see it on the screen. So Shayla first. What was your first experience with On Her Majesty's Secret Service?
I actually don't really remember, but I assume my not remembering means that I watched it too young and I just thought it was boring. But every time I've watched it since, I've kind of like grown in appreciation. And then watching it for this podcast, now I have a whole new appreciation, and it just like kind of clicked with me, which is why I love watching Bond films and watching films over and over again, because you just never know what you're going to notice that you didn't notice before. But yeah, I definitely wasn't a fan as a kid, but I definitely love it now.
Okay. What about you, Stephen? First memories of watching On Her Majesty's and experiencing the Lazenby experience?
I don't really have, just like what Shayla said there, I don't really have any memories of watching it as a kid. I think it was probably the one that I watched the least. And before, I said I took some break away from Bond and then I revisit them at the start of lockdown. When I did that, before I watched them all, I thought I'm going to make a sort of tentative ranking from memory and then see how that holds up. And I had On Her Majesty's third bottom, I think, because I just didn't have any memories of it. And then once I watched it at the start of lockdown, I thought, you know what, there's actually quite a lot to enjoy in this film. And I've watched it again and again and again with a mindset towards, I want to love this film, because a lot of Bond purists love it and rate it as one of the favorites. So I always find myself, when I'm in that position, if there's a film or something that a lot of fans love and I don't, I always want to know why. I'm thinking, I always feel like I'm missing out. So like, what am I missing out on? What are they seeing that I'm not? I almost feel like it's my, not a job, but I want to see what they're seeing. So I watched On Her Majesty's over and over again in lockdown, and I just gradually fell in love with aspects of it. I think if you asked casual viewers about On Her Majesty's, I suspect that most people would describe it as, oh, the one with the guy who only did one Bond movie, which is a little bit unfair, but it's also understandable. Um, but before any listeners write me off or put me in Bond fan jail, it's now crept into my top 10. I think I've actually got an unusual position when it comes to the fandom of this film, because I think there's some fans that have it at the bottom of the ranking because they can't see past George, or they think the editing's a bit too weird for them, or it's too slow and boring, or whatever. And I think there's a lot of purists who rate it as, the cream of the crop, right up at the top, one of the best, and you're an idiot if you don't like it. I can see where both parties are coming from. There are some elements for me that I still can't get past, but I think there's loads in this film that really, really work and is worth celebrating.
Okay. Well, Cam, what about you? Your first experience of one of Her Majesties?
I actually recall this one really vividly. So I was someone who grew up watching Bond movies, Roger Moore films, some of the Connerys, the Daltons, and my friend Mark had never seen a Bond movie, and I think this might have been when GoldenEye had been announced or something. Like, there was a reason I wanted to get him into Bond, and I feel like it was because of the Brosnan films coming out. Maybe he'd just been cast or something. So I was like, Mark, we're going to start you on the Bond films, and we're going to watch them all. And so we went to the video store, and I picked up on Her Majesty's Secret Service, which I'd never seen before, because I was like, well, this is as good a place as any, and I've never seen it, so this will be awesome. And I sat Mark down for a 2.5 hour odyssey, and I remember when we were done, he was like, that was boring as hell. And I was like, well, it's a little different than a lot of the ones I've seen. And he was like, nothing happened in that movie forever. And I'm like, yeah, well, so I didn't revisit this movie actually for quite a while, probably until they put out a new series of the VHS tapes, and I picked them up, and it wasn't till probably maybe like 4 or 5 years later that I gave it a second shot, and it's one that I over time have watched many more times, and I think had a better sense as to what it is versus back then where I was like, this isn't like Spy Who Loved Me.
Yes, definitely a wee bit different from Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah.
I think we could all agree that one.
Yeah.
For me, I avoided it. I avoided watching this thing. It was the film that had the guy who didn't do very well and didn't come back for another film. So I wrote it off. And I remember watching it as part of my grand rewatch, much like Stephen did actually. And that was the first time I experienced it. And it was literally watching it in a row after You Only Live Twice. And I thought, this is a step up from You Only Live Twice, but he's not my Bond. Like, I don't get the connection. But it looks really nice. And I was watching it on Blu-ray, I think. So it looks stunning, and it is a stunning film. But it didn't really connect with me too much until I watched it the second time, and it started to go up in my rankings, which I think it seems to be a consensus that we're all having.
Yeah. I don't think it's one that on first go around really grabs a lot of people. I'm sure there's some out there who the first time they saw it fell in love, but even back in the day, I don't think many people walked out of this one being like, this was my favorite Bond movie.
And I find that it takes a lot of attention. Like, you have to sit down and really focus. I watched it last night and I put the subtitles on just to make sure I was getting it all. And the dialogue is incredible, and you really have to listen to it. And there's a lot of really cool, cool stuff in it. So it definitely is one you really have to focus on. I think.
Yeah, when I showed it to my friend Mark, we were 12 or 13. It was not the movie for 12 or 13-year-olds.
Yeah, no.
I can imagine that, because if you come into this film with the common perception of Bond, that Bond is big and silly and escapist and about adventure and Bond saving the world with gadgets, if that's your idea and impression of Bond, and that is to a lot of people, if you ask a lot of people, describe what a Bond film is, they'll describe You Only Live Twice or The Spy Who Loved Me in abstract terms to many, many people. That is what Bond is. And then if you showed them this film, I know if I showed this film to my mum and dad, they would be, that's not Bond. Is this a Bond film? It's not proper Bond. I think a lot of people would think that, but it's so worthwhile revisiting and trying to I know you shouldn't have to try to like a film, but I feel like, when you're younger and you taste alcohol for the first time and your mates or whoever says, oh, it's fine, you'll develop a taste for it. And I remember the first time I had a sip of beer, I thought, that's disgusting. I'm never going to drink that again. But then after a few parties, you're thinking, this beer is great. Why have I never tasted this before? I'm definitely going to have more of this stuff. And I feel On Her Majesty's was a little like that for me. First viewing, nah, this is not Bond. Why am I? Where's Roger? Where's the horse's bum coming out of the back of the hangar? Why is he not getting into the Acrostar jet? Where's that stuff? But when I developed a taste for this film, I've got it in this unique bracket where, just what Shayla was saying a second ago, it's a film where you maybe have to be in the mood for. It's not, I'm feeling a bit hungover on a Sunday afternoon and I want to watch A View to a Kill. It's Christmas Eve, I'm in a mood for some classic Bond, and you sit down and you soak it in.
Well, and that's what I think about when it comes to this film, and we'll get to my thoughts on the film now in a little bit, but it's really one of those, we all have bands that we like, music that we like, and there's always an album from that band that only the fans like.
Now, Scott, you're wearing a Metallica shirt, and so I assume you're referring to either Lulu or Saint Anger.
Absolutely Saint Anger. I love that empty sounding snare drum. It's great.
Awesome.
It's round my neck, my friend. Well, okay, Cam. What I need is a man to dominate me.
Okay. With facts?
So could you give me some information on Her Majesty's and how it happened?
Yeah, for sure. So this one was originally going to shoot after Goldfinger. So they had Richard Maybaum adapt it. He wanted to keep it very faithful to the novel, which was considered one of Ian Fleming's best. And what happened was they figured out all the deal with Thunderball. And so that wound up happening instead. And they kept kind of kicking it around. Like, they did consider also doing On Her Majesty's in place of You Only Live Twice. But because of locations, they ended up going with You Only Live Twice, just because of the Swiss Alps that time of year didn't really work out for shooting On Her Majesty's first, which would have made the whole Blofeld story a little simpler and a little easier to understand, but nonetheless, it ended up getting pushed down the road. And so they brought on Peter Hunt to direct this film. He was an editor who'd obviously been very influential in shaping the visual style of Bond films up until then. And, he'd really never done a film as a directorial effort before. This was his debut, which is a pretty impressive debut considering just the scale involved. He would go on to do a lot of movies that just, they're kind of like B movies, like things like Shout at the Devil with Roger Moore. He also did Wild Geese 2 with Barbara Carrera. And he also did a movie called Assassination with Charles Bronson that I watched like maybe 3 months ago on a whim. And not great. Not great. So, it's you look at it and you're like, how did the same person that shot On Her Majesty's make Assassination? And obviously there's a money difference, but it's just like visual style alone is a huge leap between the two. So very strange. But nonetheless, Connery was clearly out after You Only Live Twice. And so Eon was like, we need a new Bond. And what proceeded from there was just a massive cattle call to try to find a new Bond. They apparently auditioned 413 actors for the role. It was about on the level, if not bigger, of when they were looking for young Anakin for Phantom Menace.
Wow. I didn't realize the hunt for Anakin was that arduous.
Yeah, it was crazy. And same with, actually, you know what? Same with Hayden Christensen. They were like scouting the world for like kids to play young Anakin.
Yippee!
Well, they really struck gold there.
Are you an angel?
Yippee! So they tested a ton of other actors. They offered it to Roger Moore, who was busy with The Saint at the time. Timothy Dalton was talked to, but he felt he was too young. They talked to Adam West, who was doing Batman at the time.
Oh, I'd have loved to have seen that.
Oh, it would have been crazy.
Part of me would have loved to have seen Adam West as Batman. Bond, I can't imagine it, but part of me just wishes there was an alternate universe somewhere with Adam West being Bond.
He would have felt like Roger Moore before Roger Moore.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just a ton of other actors. But they came across George Lazenby. At the time, he was a model, best known for TV spots for Fry's Turkish Delight. Now, Scott, being British, I assume you're very familiar with these.
I just ate one before coming on here. It's delicious.
Now, Lazenby talked his way into a meeting with Seltzman. And, like, whenever you're talking about the history of events surrounding George Lazenby, they get very there's no single one story. You hear many different stories. So the version you often hear is he wanted the Bond job, so he went and got a suit tailor-made to look exactly like Sean Connery, went and got a haircut just like Bond, and went in and talked to Harry Saltzman. That's the version that seems to be the popular version, but there's other variations about running into people at barber salons and things like this. So you can watch the movie Becoming Bond, which is the documentary on George Lazenby and his work as James Bond, and you just get the sense George Lazenby likes to tell some tall tales.
It's a really fun documentary, but yeah, I think its grasp on the truth is tenuous.
Yes. And so he went to this interview with Saltzman and lied his basically ass off. He told them he was a ski instructor, a karate expert, that he'd done films in Hong Kong and in Germany, so he had a lot of international fame. And he basically said he just gave them all of these facts that they knew they couldn't double check. That they'd be like, I guess if he says he's like popular in Germany, I guess we're too lazy to figure that out. I don't know.
It just sounds like the scene in Friends where Joey says he can dance.
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah, okay. That's how I pictured the interview going. All right.
Yeah. So ultimately they gave it to him, and they said it was his sexual prowess that really sold him. It was the fact that they just believed the confidence of this guy, just the arrogance he had, applying for this job and talking his way into the offices. They were like, this guy can be James Bond. And I got the sense just from reading about it that like Peter Hunt was actually pretty okay with signing off on this as well, because he really liked the idea, I think, of crafting a Bond actor. So I think as long as it was someone he felt could do the action and pull off sort of the dramatic moments, he was okay with kind of going along with whoever they wanted.
Well, your sexual prowess obviously worked on me and got me to do this podcast, so...
That's right. And I also told you I was a ski instructor.
I'm going to walk away from that one.
Yeah.
There's too many lines.
Yeah. So, as I said, like the early drafts of this were, they wanted to stick close to the script. There was a version that involved a monkey. So, originally Bond was going to meet a monkey that Blofeld had as a pet, and the pet monkey was going to help him save the day at the end. That is a movie I would have liked to have seen.
That's terrific. Was it called Dr. No by any chance?
Oh, I wonder if it was Dr. No returning, because originally they were looking at having Dr. No be a monkey. So
I'm not sure who's got this thing for monkeys in the Bond writers' room, but
we've been robbed. We've never gotten one.
I can't stand for that.
I know.
I need a monkey now.
You had Roger Moore in an ape suit in Octopussy, but it's not enough.
Wait, what was Doo-Doo?
Doo-doo.
A bunny?
In No Time.
Yeah,
bunny?
rabbit was it.
Oh, it's a
I
bunny.
think.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We've got a giant gorilla in Diamonds Are Forever.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Ah.
Yes. The now awkward moment where, yes, the woman turns into the gorilla. Yeah, we'll be talking about that movie not too far down the road.
Yeah.
So, they had a couple of things that did change, though. They originally were looking at having Bond be drastically injured and require facial reconstruction, which would explain why he looks like George Lazenby. It would have been notable. Like, had they done that, it would have been kind of crazy, but I think it would have been fun, honestly.
Would you get the old, like, the reveal where they take the bandage off really slowly, it peels down his face, and then it's, and then like, just George Lazenby mugs at the screen?
Yes, definitely.
I'm sure it's been in a TV show before, but I would totally buy it.
Yeah. And also originally there was not going to be a bobsled action sequence. It was going to be involving cable cars, but Where Eagles Dare beat them to the punch, and so they did a rewrite to remove a cable car big finale action sequence.
It's just nice to hear Where Eagles Dare come back up again.
Yeah.
That's a great film. And to be fair, that bobsleigh scene was shot by John Glenn, who we are speaking to later this week. So on Friday, look out for that interview.
That's right.
That's our second Christmas present to you.
That's right. And so during production, they did bring in novelist Simon Raven to come in and just basically punch up dialogue. He doesn't have a screenplay credit, but he does have like an additional dialogue credit on the film. It's because they weren't really that happy with the Tracy and Blofeld sequences, so they brought him in to work on that dialogue. That's pretty much his major contribution.
So what we had was the finished product that they were happy with.
Yeah, that's right. Save it, Scott.
Oh.
Save it, Scott. And
No comment. No comment.
speaking of Tracy, Diana Rigg was chosen over Brigitte Bardot and Catherine Deneuve. They really liked the Avengers, so that really helped her get her foot in the door for this one. And it becomes very clear when you read about the production that they really wanted a very strong actress in this role, because George Lazenby was obviously a model known for Turkish Delight commercials, so they needed someone to really carry these dramatic relationship scenes. So if you look at those three, if they picked any of those three actresses, all of them are very strong talents.
You keep hammering home these Turkish delights, Cam. Do you want some Turkish delights?
I've had them before.
Do you like them?
They're okay.
Well, they didn't really help my joke, so just move on, I guess.
Okay, well then. So the production, you hear all these like kind of anecdotal stories about like how it was a rough production, but what I really found was it was mostly just that like Lazenby was a guy who, it sounds like, signed up because he thought it would be really fun to play James Bond. And it's not really that much fun to play James Bond. Ask Daniel Craig.
Or Sean immediately after You Only Live Twice. He was not having a blast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this shoot was considerably longer. Peter Hunt was very exacting and really was putting a ton of effort into just the technical aspects of the movie. Obviously, you look at the editing in the film, but just all of the action felt much more ambitious. And that meant it was a lot more exhausting for the actor playing Bond. So this one was like, I think maybe 3 months longer than most Bond productions. And, Lazenby was a little bit of a rough and tumble guy who liked to party. And Diana Rigg, I think, was taking this very seriously. And so there was a little bit of friction here and there. It does sound, though, that Peter Hunt got tired of him real quick. Peter Hunt apparently was on set with some friends, and Lazenby told his friends to leave. And that was pretty much the end of their relationship. Everything else was passed on through associates from then forward.
Well, that sounds frosty.
Yes, apparently Lazenby was put up to it by someone else on the crew, but nonetheless, did not go over well when you're telling the director's friends to leave the set.
And yeah, there's a lot riding on this film. This is the first time they've tried to recast Bond.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand why they were, the word you used was exacting. I can understand why they're very precious of getting it right, because replacing Connery is no easy feat.
No, exactly. And when it came to stunts, Lazenby did a lot of them, and I think we'll talk about that when we actually break down the movie, just in terms of like the physicality of this Bond versus maybe what we saw in the previous Bond film, You Only Live Twice. And it was often to the producer's chagrin, where Lazenby was really hurling himself into some dangerous stunts. But we'll talk about the evidence of that later on. But the other thing was, Lazenby claims he did every dialogue scene in one take. I have doubts about this.
I also have doubts about that.
So he's saying he only ever had one take whenever he was talking, even though most of his lines are dubbed.
Yes.
There's an inconsistency in that story already.
Yes. The whole thing is a little sketchy. So, as all Lazenby history goes, it's up for debate. So, the movie had a budget of $8 million, domestically did 22.8, international 59, for a worldwide total of 82. Now, that's in comparison to You Only Live Twice did 111.6. So, this was a bit of a drop-off, and part of the reason we only got one Lazenby. Also, it didn't help that on the press tour, he showed up with, like, hippie hair and a beard and everything, and just the Eon people were done. They were done. And his manager was telling him Bond was over anyway because the counterculture was taking over. And so there was many factors tying into why Lazenby didn't come back. So the top three for this year, number 1 was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Number 2 was The Love Bug. Number 3 was Midnight Cowboy. On Her Majesty's landed number 11 between Goodbye Columbus and the very sexy I Am Curious Yellow, which I don't know if anyone's ever heard of here, but it was quite the saucy movie back in the day.
Never heard of it.
Could you please explain in great detail why it was so saucy?
I will let you look that one up. I'll bet you now it's probably pretty tame. I've actually never seen it.
Okay. You got me excited for almost a moment, but
Mm-hmm.
okay. You brought me back down. Thank you.
And really just the final note, this movie did beat out Where Eagles Dare and Topaz, the Alfred Hitchcock film, for spy films that year. And German actress Ilse Steppat, who played Irma Bunt in the film, died less than a week after it was released. So that's pretty notable, actually. But the future of Bond we'll talk about when we get to Diamonds Are Forever, because obviously things would shape up quite differently coming off of a Lazenby film. But that can wait for another day, and that wraps me up on Her Majesties.
I'm still. I mean, maybe we'll talk about the legacy of Lazenby a little bit, and if we do a Lazenby special down the road, we'll do it again. But I still find the whole him turning up to the premiere with a beard and them just being completely put off as just the weirdest story. It's just a beard, and it's just a premiere. I don't really. But then I'm from a generation where people just had beards.
Right. I wonder how much of it was just going off, quotes I read from Peter Hunt and just how Eon was approaching the whole thing. I wonder how much of it was we are hiring an actor to groom into James Bond. Like, we don't want to deal with the actor that was Sean Connery. We want essentially an action figure that we can put under contract forever and is going to become our James Bond. And when he wasn't playing along, it didn't go great. That's the kind of the sense I get. It really feels like everyone wants to take credit for sculpting a new Bond versus hiring an actor with ideas who might have a different interpretation, which is what they would do, obviously, with Roger Moore and Sean Connery and Dalton and what have you.
Okay. Well, I suppose we should get down to what we think now. What's it like, 50 years later or something like that, or close to at this point?
Yeah.
What's the math? Yeah, close to 50. Let's go in order of who I have on the screen. I'm going to throw it to. It's moved around. It's going to be Stephen up first.
What do I think of the film overall now?
Yeah, where do you sit on it now? You've revisited it for the show. Has it bumped up in your listings? Has it evolved really?
It's currently sitting 10th in my ranking, and I think in many ways it's a top tier Bond film. It has one of the very best endings in the series. I think it's got loads of brilliant scenes. If I sat down and did something nerdy like my top 30 Bond moments or scenes or whatever, I think probably 5 or 6 of them would come from this film. It looks great. It sounds great. And there's so much to love about it. There are some things I can't get past. I'm hoping that in future viewings I might grow to love them. One of the things I can't get past is the editing of the fight sequences. Now, I love John Glenn. He's my favourite Bond director. I get a feeling that the editing was possibly dictated by Peter Hunt. And I love the way that Peter Hunt edited the early films, the Terence Young films in particular. But in this film, I find that the editing is an acquired taste, and I've not acquired it yet. It's very frantic and quick cut, and there's a couple of moments where I feel it's almost unintentionally comical, and the punches and blows are, they're accompanied by all these exaggerated sounds, and the cowbells in the shed, and when they're fighting in the corridor and they're hitting against all the filing cabinets. And I know that's the purpose, is to have all these exaggerated sounds to make them sound like thunder or whatever, but them combined with the crazy camera zooms, and for me it just renders them slightly choppy and jarring and a bit disorientating. But I'd like to say, in a year's time I'll revisit it and think, yeah, I love them now. I can see what Hunt's going for, just doesn't really work for me yet. But all that said, I'm definitely on the side of liking this film more than disliking it. If I met a fellow Bond fan and they told me that one of their favourites was on Her Majesty's, I would instantly think, yeah, they've got good taste. I can get along with this Bond fan. I think the score is possibly one of the finest in the series. I'm a huge John Barry nerd, to the point where during lockdown my wife had to ask me to stop listening to the On Her Majesty soundtrack. She says, do we have to get this every day? I mean, it's lovely, but every day. There's so many great tracks in it. The music when Bond is in the helicopter going Journey to Piz Gloria, I think I don't want to sound like I'm one of those film critics who uses all those hyperbolic statements, but I just think that when he's in the helicopter, it's euphoric, it's heavenly music. Part of me wishes that music had been played maybe in a romantic scene, so it was more to do with him and Tracy, because it's not really a big moment. He's in a helicopter with Irma Brunt talking about ice, not ground, ice. It's not really a romantic moment, but you just get this gorgeous music. I love the music when he's in Gumbald's office and he's cracking the safe. And of course, Barry's instrumental of "We Have All the Time in the World" just might be the loveliest music of all time. And talking about this has made me think about something that you were saying earlier, about the film being epic and bigger than ever. I get a sense from all the research I've done that everyone on this film, I don't think they were terrified that Connery wasn't there, but I get the feeling that everyone was on their A game. I think John Barry said this before in an interview, that they felt they would have to step everything up because they'd lost Connery. And when they had Connery, I wonder if he was almost a safety net, that they felt, well, if this scene isn't great, he'll carry it. Or if this set isn't brilliant, Connery's charisma will carry through. And without that safety net, I wonder if everyone just upped their game, because the cinematography's lovely and the music's great and the direction is really interesting and the plot is on point. So yeah, there's so much to love in this film. But if someone said to me, I can't get past Lazenby, or I can't get past the editing, I would see where they were coming from.
I wrote down, I didn't know George Lazenby's Bond had machine gun hands, because every time he punches, it actually makes a literal bang noise. So that's a strange choice. And we do touch on the editing with John Glynn later in the week, and he actually mentions that Peter Hunt had a lot of input on the editing. So you saying that is completely correct. So that makes total sense. You picked up on it.
It almost feels like Peter Hunt pushing his editing style to the furthest possible level. Like there was nowhere to go after this, because he was out after this movie. He doesn't come back for, Diamonds Are Forever, which doesn't have this sort of rapid style editing. And I don't know, maybe if you'd pushed it any further than this, it would have become unwatchable. Like, who knows, right?
Yeah, I think isn't there a quote of some description that Peter Hunt's editing style in the early films was, if you see James Bond leaving a room, you'll see him turn, and the next thing you'll see is the door closing. I don't think you ever actually see that, but it was an exaggerated quote to give you an example of Hunt's editing style. And you're totally bang on the money with this being the furthest example of him pushing that style. And I get that it works for a lot of fans. It's just a little bit much for me. I do like the fight in the hotel room though. That's quite good. Where is it Shay he's fighting, and he knocks him through the little gate and then says "gate crasher," and then has his little caviar. He's walking out of the room. That's quite nice.
Well, what about you, Shayla? Has it changed?
It has changed, definitely. I like it a lot more. It's 11 in my rankings now. It might go up. I have to just sit down with them and maybe see. But there's so much to love, and now I totally get it. Like the allure of Tracy, I understand. The physicality that George brings, I get it. He's fantastic. Maybe some of his line deliveries are a little bit off, but I mean, he's not an actor. So but I agree a lot with Stephen with the editing. That was like the main point that I had, that I just found the editing kind of bizarre in places. Like the fight scene in Draco's office, where there's like the dramatic zoom on the door as Bond's going through it. I just thought like little weird things like that are so bizarre. But then when he's on the other side of the door with the knife, that's like one of the coolest shots. Like it's so perfectly framed and wonderful. So like the speeding up and the cutting is kind of weird, but it definitely has. I love it. I'm so happy that I rewatched it and was really paying attention to it, because there's a lot to love in it.
Well, let me just ask, because you've alluded to it, but it's obviously gone up in your rankings from rewatching it for this. Where did it sit before, and what was your opinion of it then at that point? Like, what's allowed it to be bumped up? Is it just the performances, or what's been the key to bumping up your rankings?
I think it's my age. I'm older now, and I can sit down and appreciate the films that move a little slower. But I mean, I don't even really find that this film moves that slowly, and I find the action scenes are amazing. So, but yeah, I would say it's just because I've watched it now at 31 as opposed to 12 years old, when it would have probably been at the very bottom. Because I remember as a kid being like, "Oh, this is just the one-off that nobody really cares about, so I'll watch it once and then that's it." And I'm glad that I no longer feel that way.
You can understand as a kid why you wouldn't latch onto it as much too, just because of Lazenby.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't feel like that sort of strong Bond presence you're used to. Like the movie so often is working through style and action sequences versus putting the focus on Bond the way that the other ones do. The other ones have that, like you are tuning in because you love Roger Moore or because you love Connery, versus like this one, I feel like you're tuning in just because you love Bond, but you're willing to look at the world of Bond versus just spend a lot of time with the actor.
That makes sense.
Well, I was thinking about this sort of phenomena, and also like a lot of the other Bond actors are almost maybe not father surrogates, but they're I don't know. Maybe father surrogates is the correct term, but you want to spend time around them and hang out with them. Whereas Lazenby feels like a contemporary.
Yeah.
He feels like he's very youthful. I think, is he the youngest Bond when he starts?
Yeah, I think he was 30 years old.
So I mean, I've got 4 years on him at this point, but he feels like someone who's of my age. So I'm not looking to him for guidance. He's doing exactly what I would do. So it's a different viewing experience. So I can see maybe some people didn't connect in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Cam, on to you. What's changed?
I think age is a big factor, and just at this point when I watch Honor Majesties, it hits all the beats that I really love in Bond. It's so luxurious. Like, it is a movie that just visually is so dynamic. I think there's a reason, Steven Soderbergh has written a love letter to this film that unfortunately you can't find on his blog anymore. It's too bad. I would like to post it in the show notes, but
I did read that though. That was great. That was really good reading that.
yeah, like he says he will watch this movie before he goes to shoot one of his own movies just for inspiration because he's so in love with Peter Hunt's style and just how incredible this movie looks. But it's not just that it like looks great or that the editing's awesome. To me, I love diversions in Bond movies. I love those weird moments that you could not get in any other movie. This movie's full of them. This movie has chicken hypnosis. You're not going to see that in another movie. You're going to have all these strange moments strewn throughout here, mixed in with, I mean, some of the best action in the series. All the ski stuff I'm sure we'll talk about, but just, it's absolutely incredible to watch just the technique of the action on screen and just how big a scale it is, especially in comparison to the movie that would follow it. And also just the style of it. I was really paying attention this time to the way they introduced Bond off the bat, where it's just like close-ups of the cigarette, close-ups of just the elements, kind of the gadgets of Bond, that sort of thing, the accoutrements that he always has with him. And it's just so much visually going on here. It's Peter Hunt really just probably knowing he doesn't have a Connery level actor, but like, how do I ground all of this in a world where people feel like they are having a full-on James Bond experience? And it really feels like the full James Bond experience. And of course, throw on a romantic story that it has some issues for sure, but just the dynamic between him and Tracy is so fantastic and obviously has held up very well, just their dynamic.
It sounds like you've learnt to love the chicken flesh, to love the chicken voice and how it sounds. And...
Scott, I need to go now and eat chicken.
It's such a weird thing to have the allergy to as well. Like, of all the allergies you could have, chicken.
I'm surprised that more fans haven't picked up on the fact that, as you just said there, that Blofeld says to learn to love their voice. Now, let's just stop and think about that for a minute. A chicken's voice. I mean, what sort of chickens was she allergic to? Foghorn, leghorn?
Yes.
That is such a bizarre line that I remember when I watched it during lockdown, I had to pause it and rewind it. I thought, I didn't hear that. He's not saying that. He bloody is. But yeah, bizarre. Really bizarre moment.
I just thought of this actually. Could it potentially be like Spectre said cuckoo, or like Blofeld said cuckoo in Spectre because of the chicken voice, maybe?
Oh.
I don't know.
I've never thought
Me
of that before.
neither, just
Never
clicked.
thought of that before. Good point.
Yeah, like some sort of bird references
Wait,
they want
wait.
to work in with him?
Do you mean it just clucked?
Oh,
Oh, very good.
Ooh, that was good. Ooh, that was good.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
What I found that was really strange was, because I think a lot of people gripe about not having Donald Pleasance back as Blofeld, and it really, from what I read, you get the sense that in like 1968 they were like, yeah, that didn't work out. We got to move on. That did not work very well. So let's just get Telly Savalas and ignore that. Whereas now we look at Donald Pleasance as like the most iconic Blofeld possible. Didn't seem to be the case when they were coming off of You Only Live Twice.
That being said, though, I only feel like he's iconic in look. Like, I don't think he's iconic in his performance. I'm not the biggest fan of Blofeld in You Only Live Twice.
Kill James Bond.
Well, okay, Shayla, I've got a question for you then. Who is your favorite Blofeld?
I think it would actually have to be Telly. Like, because
Is it?
yeah,
Okay.
I love the way he holds cigarettes. I love just his whole vibe. Like, I don't know, because he's like an opponent more so for Bond
Mm,
than like with Donald Pleasance. It kind of you're not surprised that Bond takes him down in a way because he kind of hides behind everybody. Where with Telly's Blofeld, he's like in the action and he's in the bobsled, and like he's running after Bond.
right. Yeah. I mean, it would have been very sad to watch a 6'4" Lazenby beat the crap out of Donald Pleasance. It would have been just tragic to watch.
Agree.
But Scott, what about you? What about your revisit?
For me, it's interesting. The film probably sits around about. Last time I wrote it down, I think I put it as number 5
Hmm.
in my rankings, but it might have jumped down a little bit on this revisit. Funnily enough, I just I love everything that's going on in the film apart from George Lazenby.
Right.
And this isn't a controversial statement. I think a lot of people will agree. Big Bond fans, little Bond fans. It's it's a fantastic film, and I think Cam said this earlier. They were, or maybe it was Stephen actually. They were really trying to get everything else to work because they weren't sure about their main actor. So they're firing on all cylinders when it comes to cinematography, when it comes to action sequences, when it comes to the Bond girl. You've got the one he marries, the one whose legacy is held all the way to the end of Brosnan as the only one that got away, almost, if you know what I mean, like the most powerful woman in his life, and it has all that going for it, and then it just has this performance by a guy who's admittedly not an actor. And I just think that's what stops it from being maybe now in my top 5. I just think that his performance isn't that good. I think he warms up as the film goes along, but ultimately I struggle to see him as James Bond.
I think for me, the reason that it works for me now, and look, there's the whole section where he's dubbed. There's like half an hour or 40 minutes of this movie where he's dubbed. So it's almost like it's tough to even gauge the performance at that point. But there's like a youthful romantic nature to this movie that I think you need sort of a younger Bond here. And I think Lazenby really pulls sections like that off. And also just how athletic he is. When you watch, like, just, we touched on earlier, the dropping to his knees to hurl the knife there in Draco's office. But even just the way he does the gun barrel, like dropping to the knee and firing at the screen. There's something about just the physicality of this Bond that I really like. And so often people talk about, boy, if Connery had starred in this, it would have been the all-time greatest Bond film. But I'm like, I don't know. Like, I look at Connery and You Only Live Twice, and I'm like, would he have brought this level of energy? Like, I just don't know.
Funny story, I in doing research for this episode, I read that Sean Connery actually has said that he would have preferred to do a film like On Her Majesty's as opposed to You Only Live Twice. And I'm actually in the camp of, I don't know why people say they don't think that Sean could do this movie. Like, because I find that to be such a bizarre argument. Because are you saying that he isn't a good actor? He can't do emotional stuff? Like, I think Connery could have totally pulled off On Her Majesty's, but maybe I'm wrong. But I have faith in Sean Connery.
Well, I mean, like, Connery's a way better actor than Lazenby. That's not even up for debate. It's more that there's something, like, kind of wide-eyed about the romantic nature of Bond in this movie that I'm just trying to picture a Connery coming off of, like, 4 or 5 other Bond films and buying into that as much. Whereas, like, I kind of buy the puppy dog eyes that Lazenby has in this movie, more so than I would kind of a cynical Connery take.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Like, maybe if On Her Majesty's came sooner, it would have been
Mm-hmm.
like a Sean one. It would have been better.
I would bite back against that. I think it would almost make the marriage work better if it was Sean, because he's meant to be surprised that he's fallen in love.
Right.
And if you have this jaded man after 5 films of loving and losing, you think of like is it Kissy in You Only Live Twice, who he kind of marries?
Yeah.
Yeah, or is it? Yeah, it's Kissy, and like that whole thing, and he's loved and lost a lot of people, and this is the first one who's actually really loved and actually properly lost, and so you actually could, I think, buy the surprise of everyone around him that he got married, whereas this one is a new guy, and it's weird that Moneypenny is surprised that he's married.
That's a good point, though. I think I agree with that.
And I think Sean could have done it.
Agreed.
I think the key would have been his enthusiasm level, because It's kind of widely agreed, and I'm not saying I feel this way, but it's widely agreed that he looks slightly bored in some scenes in You Only Live Twice, and it is widely known that he wanted to quit the role by that point. He'd had enough. I think had Peter Hunt or somebody convinced him, we're going to make a different kind of movie here, and I think if they could have got him up for it, I think it could have been amazing. But that's the key thing. Had they have got him interested in exactly what Scott was saying there, I think it would have had just a little bit more punch if this guy who had been the playboy and we'd seen him with all these women and never fallen in love, if he had fallen in love for the first time, it might have had that extra bit of punch. But you know what? We'll never know. We'll never know. We've got the movie we've got, and I think that George does pretty well for a non-actor. When I was younger, I couldn't enjoy him as Bond, and to me, I kind of agree with what Scott was saying earlier, that he is one of the things for me that holds this movie back from greatness. But I think he's pretty solid. But I would also argue that his performance alternates between scenes. So I think he's really strong, or he's strongest in the scenes where he doesn't need to speak. When he enters the casino and he just strides through from one side to the other, or when he's in Gumbold's office and there's no dialogue required, because he was a really good mover. He was really good at just walking around. He had that physicality. And for someone to have the balls as a non-actor to want to replace Sean Connery in the most iconic film role of all time, that just sort of shows you what sort of confidence the guy had. And that's an element that a lot of fans would say is completely integral to play Bond, that you need that confidence. And he radiates confidence throughout this whole film. Shayla said earlier on that she feels that a lot of his line readings was it flat, you said, or something like that? Yeah. I feel exactly the same way. There's a lot of his line delivery in so many of the scenes just feels off. Maybe some of them are too eager, some of them are too flat. And I've got another theory, and you guys can tell me if you agree with this or not. I wonder if Peter Hunt decided to dub so much of him with George Baker because Lazenby was just not experienced at dubbing, and his initial line readings were just off. So it was maybe easier to spend 20, 25 minutes of the movie using an experienced actor like George Baker, who could probably just come in and do the line dubbings like that. Whereas with Lazenby, he would have had to work a lot harder.
I wonder also if you look at that whole segment where he's dubbed, a lot of it is kind of comedic. And I wonder if they felt like he was a little flat to be delivering these because comedy's hard. And you hear dramatic actors say that all the time. And a lot of this, these kind of, these double entendres he's delivering when he's talking about genealogy to this group of women. And it's kind of like, almost like light comedy, the scenes he has, going from room to room. And it's like, I wonder if they just found that maybe he was a little too just wooden in those scenes, whereas you have, George Baker kind of getting a lot of personality off all of those lines, no matter how eye-rolling they are.
Well, I think he was quite wooden in those scenes, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, slight stiffness coming on.
It's really piling up. It's interesting because we've spent a lot of this episode so far talking about like what George might have done wrong and what we would have done without George. So I think I'll put a pin in it. What I want to move us over to is just things that we liked and sort of celebrate some of the good stuff in the film. So I'm going to throw it to Stephen first. Something you liked about this film and tell us about it.
Okay, so one of my all-time favourite Bond scenes and moments is at the ice rink. I love the fact that Bond is looking scared and alone when he's sitting there. He looks like he's out of ideas. It's almost a first. He's got no gadget to save him. He's got no out. He's got no escape. He's actually. I love how he's pulling his collar around his face, like he's almost trying to hide. And it's edited very well with skaters sort of whizzing past and the vocals of that song that Shayla was singing earlier on, how Christmas trees are grown. He needs love, just as, and then Tracy arrives at just the perfect moment. And I love the way we see her ski first, and then the camera pans up to her. It's a slightly odd scene if you think about it, because Lazenby's Bond is pretty invincible in the fight scenes. Whenever he's fighting someone, he's like a superhero punching them with that uppercut like Ryu from Street Fighter 2. But I think Lazenby does sell the fear of that scene. And my theory, and there's no way to prove this is right or wrong, but my theory is that that's the moment when his Bond fell in love with Tracy, when she showed up,
Right.
just when he needed her.
Well, it's like you have the Angels of Death, Blofeld's, hypnotized women he's sending out. That's sort of like the angel to save Bond there showing up in that really kind of like heavenly moment. So it makes a lot of sense. And I've always been a big fan of the bear popping up and taking Bond's photo and then screaming with laughter. And I did ask John Glenn about that moment, so you'll have to see if I get a good answer to my investigation into this bear. But yeah, like that whole sequence is just, it's almost done like a horror film at parts where you just have that heightened level of paranoia. It feels almost like something like Rosemary's Baby or something. And I've always really loved it.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, what about you, Shayla? Something you liked about the film?
Well, the one thing that I noticed that I took away the most watching it this time was I just liked I loved all the throwbacks that there was. So like I love that like in the title sequence, it's a throwback to all of the other missions so that you're watching a Bond film. Even though Bond doesn't look like Connery anymore, you're in a Bond film. And I love when he's going through his desk and he has the rebreather and you can hear underneath the mango tree. So I actually like that actually might be my favorite thing just because I think that's such a cool thing that they they wanted to show the continuity and they wanted you to know you were watching a Bond film and that it was connected to the Sean one. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it kind of puts down the codename theory as much as it can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even though he says it never happened to the other fella.
That's true.
Yeah. It's very interesting that you had that as a highlight, Shayla. I actually had that as a dislike.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if I like the sort of fourth wall meta commentary in the film. Like I know like Moneypenny says, "Oh, same old James," and so there's comments that's obviously meant to say like there is a through thread here. It's the same guy. Obviously, you get, as you say, like all the stuff in the drawer. You get the knife from Dr. No, etc. But like seeing scenes of the other Blofeld
Oh, yeah.
in the title crawl and stuff, it just reminds you of the good you had before. Like I'm not a big fan of continuity in Bond.
Right.
I'll just say it. I would almost rather them all be separate entities, but I understand that's not necessarily the case. And so like them referencing all these films and actually showing clips from them, I think really for me just detracts from trying to initiate you into a new Bond.
That's fair.
What do you think about that, Stephen?
I would have loved to have been sitting there in 1969 watching this film for the first time, and then George Lazenby turns to the screen and addresses the audience. I can imagine that would have went down pretty oddly. In general, I think it's an odd approach because you have so many moments in this film where they're trying to reassure you that this is the same James Bond, but then he literally turns to the screen and talks about the other fella. It's very inconsistent. I don't really know what else they could have done back then, because following Connery, who at the time they had on the posters as Sean Connery is Bond, they had pretty much marked out their stable back then, but that this one actor was him. So I think it's the safe approach was to keep trying to remind you that this is the same guy. The thing with watching Bond as a kid so much and watching it as an adult so much is that I don't know how I feel about him turning to the camera and saying this never happened to the other fella. I think if I watched that now for the first time, I would hate it. I would hate it with a passion, but I don't mind it so much now because I grew up with it and I've seen it and I know it and I'm familiar with it, and it's become a sort of comedy moment among Bond fans, and George is now referred to as the other fella, which is bizarre in itself because he's not the other fella. Connery is the other fella in the film. But Laz is now known as the other fella. So I don't really hate it, but I don't like the idea of it. It's a really bold choice. I can imagine there being some big discussions in the creative team back then and say, right, how are we going to address the fact that he's not Connery? Let's get him to turn to the camera and actually say that to the audience. I can imagine there being a few heated arguments and debates about that. But
it's so weird. They just don't seem to know what they want with it, because at the beginning, as Cam was saying, he was paying attention to it when he was watching the film. They're sort of trying to hide that it's Lazenby. They're just giving you hints of a well-chiseled man in a suit. You get little glances in the rearview mirror and such, and then you get that reveal when he's fighting the guys on the beach. Slowly, they're almost hiding the fact that it's Lazenby. And then he does the whole wink at the camera, and then you get all the references in the title cards, and then all the stuff in the drawers. And also, like, there's a guy sweeping in the background later on who's whistling the Goldfinger theme.
Yeah.
This film doesn't know whether it wants to have its cake and eat it, sort of thing. You know, like it doesn't know what it wants to be.
It's also like the first, I think, James Bond film to be really self-referential. You have little bits and pieces, but nothing like this, where they're really suddenly like celebrating their own history.
Until No Time to Die.
Oh, and Die Another Day. Don't forget Die Another Day.
Well, that was for an anniversary, though. So I mean,
Yeah.
I've got some notes to tackle No Time to Die in a bit, actually. I'm looking forward to discussing that. But yeah, Stephen, go ahead.
Yeah, looking back on this film, something struck me that I've never really considered before is that this was such a different film at the time, in the way that it was the first Bond film to take things down a notch and go back to reality. Nowadays we just take it as standard that every couple of years Bond will get bigger and sillier and more fantastical, and then there'll be the dark, hard edge one. We just accept that now. We know that's the way that things go. You'll go from a light to dark. You'll go from a fantastical escapist romp to grounded hardest thrillers, from Moonraker to For Your Eyes Only. We know that's what happens. But back then it must have been that must have been a debate too, in that I think it was Peter Hunt that said he wanted to bring things back to reality and be a bit more grounded. But I imagine that must have been a bit of a risk, because if you look at the trajectory from Dr. No to You Only Live Twice, the films just get gradually bigger and more fantastical with each entry. So, I mean, I don't know if there was anywhere they could have went after You Only Live Twice, but it is pretty bold, and it's also quite a different film to all the other films in the series. It's something of an outlier, not just because of George, because the first act, if you stop and look at it, is almost like this romantic melodrama at times. It has a falling in love montage. The film ends on a real downer, and at the time, it did quite a few things that Bond films weren't supposed to do, as Bond falling in love, quitting the service, getting married. So it was a real risky film. I can see why back then fans maybe balked at it a bit, or I can imagine a lot of fans getting whiplash after You Only Live Twice, which is so Bondy and so formulaic. To go from one to the other would have been maybe it was too much too soon. But it's a real interesting film to look at from a historical point of view in Bond, and I wonder if it was. I wonder if it's become a trendsetter now, but were fans ready for it back then? I suspect they weren't.
I think that's a really good point. I think it's much like the Dalton era. People weren't ready for the full-on action Bond that now we all mostly seem to love with Daniel Craig. So I think that's a very good point.
Also, were they ready to take James Bond seriously? Because, like the ending of this movie doesn't work unless you can actually invest yourself in the emotional journey of the character. And that's not something they asked you to do in, Goldfinger.
Yeah. Well,
I think we've been quite critical of George's acting in this film. Well, we haven't been too harsh, but
not yet.
I think he really nails that final scene.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The scene in the car, I think he really, really gets that. I'm sure I read somewhere that Hunt and him workshopped that scene because they knew it was a big one. It was the one they had to sell. And Lazenby does a fantastic job in that scene of cradling her, and it's quite all right. It's quite all right, really. It's so sad. And one of the things about this film that I think is just slightly off for me is I don't like the use of the Bond theme at the final credits. It just feels wrong to me. You've just seen the love of his life get shot in the head, and they want to suddenly bring you back. You can tell why they did it. Surely somebody said, "Well, we want the audience walking out. We need something uplifting." That is the film that should have ended with Louis Armstrong.
Right.
Yeah.
We have all the time in the world. That's the film because it's this romantic, lovely song, and it would have just followed on perfectly from her death. But is her death one of the greatest scenes in the series? I think it's got to be. But controversially, for me, it's not the most affecting moment in the film.
Oh.
Well, hang on then. Let's try and figure it out before we let you give it away.
Yeah, let's try to guess it.
like, there's nice moments I can think of. I always think of Moneypenny crying at the wedding. That one always... Is that it?
Oh,
Ba-boom.
Oh, he nailed it.
I just love the exchange they have. It's so subtle, and there's no words, and they just give each other that little wave, and he throws the hat, which is just perfect. You know, after all the years of Connery tossing the hat in the office, throws the hat to her, and she just looks heartbroken. That moment, really. This is my favorite Moneypenny movie, with the little hat toss at the wedding and the moment in the office, because Lois Maxwell is brilliant in that scene. She sells it from a character point of view as well. She knows that he's being reckless and impetuous. She knows he doesn't really want to quit, and she saves him from himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that lovely moment with the intercom, you know, what would I do without you? And then Bernard Lee turns into the sleaziest man in the world for 1 second. What would I do without you, Moneypenny? Just
I agree
Yeah,
though. That
love
was
that.
that's one of my notes. How incredible Moneypenny is in this. She might be my actually she might be my favorite part. Maybe it's not all of the throwbacks to the Sean Connery films. It's just Lois Maxwell. Like I just think she's so like her performance is like perfect.
It's a real shame when you watch this movie that they didn't give her more heavy lifting to do in future movies, because
Mm-hmm.
this was really proof positive she could do it.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously, we live in an era now where Moneypenny gets a lot to do in these more recent Bond films. Maybe not as much as people would like, but they still give her much more to do than like what Lois Maxwell would get. And you look at a movie like this, and it's like you only gain when you give her more to do, because clearly she can pull this stuff off.
Well, Cam, what about you? What's an up? What's a like for you?
I think we just should talk about Tracy here. You know, Diana Rigg's performance in
Yep.
this. I really think this is a fantastic character and makes up for like, you know, the previous, you know, couple Connerys. You had like decent, you know, Bond leading ladies, but they weren't necessarily up to kind of matching wits with him. I think what I really like about Tracy is that not only could she match wits with Bond incredibly well, but they feel like a believable couple. But I like too the relationship she has with her father, and that she has his number like consistently throughout the movie. It's not, there's issues there obviously when, you know, her father's punching her out at the end. Hasn't aged great, guys. But throughout, her father has kind of this weird, I mean, the guy's, you know, a criminal underworld dude, but like he has this kind of backwards thinking towards how to treat her and deal with her, but it's very clear that Tracy knows how to manipulate him and is just as smart, if not smarter, than her father, and plays that up. And I like the way she sees all the angles, you know, that Draco's making this deal with Bond. I'll give you information on Blofeld if you, you know, seduce my daughter. And like she walks up and is like, yeah, I know exactly what you're doing. Just give him the information. So this character is just so dynamic, and it'll be interesting, Scott, as we, you know, talk about Tracy now, and we will be rolling around in a couple of months to talk about the, you know, the women in Diamonds Are Forever.
Yeah, what a pivot that is.
Yee.
Yeah. Oh, I am plenty. Of course you are. Tracy, I don't think they've ever had a better Bond girl since.
Vesper's pretty.
I know people will say Vesper.
Yeah.
I know people will say Vesper. I know people might say Natalia. They might say a couple more, but I don't think anyone's ever beaten Diana Rigg. I'll go down it, and this is like why this film is still in my top 10. It's a lot of it's on Diana Rigg's shoulders. Even that weird start where she's trying to drown herself in the ocean, and only on this watch did I realize it was because she was having like a mental breakdown because of her ex-husband or something like that. I didn't really realize why she was trying to kill herself. It's a bit strange, not really well explained, but she leaves such a lasting impact, and like there's a genuine sense of joy when she marries Bond, and then there's a genuine sense of loss. Anyone watching this film when she gets shot, and you feel the same loss when Vesper dies in Casino Royale. I think just to a slightly lesser degree, at least for me.
I agree with that. Vesper has never actually been that highly ranked for me. I don't know what it is about her. I'm loving her more and more as I watch it more, I guess. But I definitely agree that Tracy is probably the best Bond girl. And I never would have thought would have said that, but now since watching it over again, she's just incredible. And I love that she saves Bond. Like she's doing the driving in the car, like in the snow and stuff. Like she's amazing.
Yeah, and she shows up in a red convertible at the start of the movie in a scene that feels somewhat similar to GoldenEye with the way they introduce Xenia.
I was actually going to say I would really love someone to put ladies first over top of the car stuff in the beginning of Our Majesties, just to see. I'm sure someone has, and I just haven't seen it. But
Yeah, the one bummer to me with the relationship here is like when Bond is at that, Pitt's, the Blofeld compound there on the the Alps, that he's like just hopping room to room, like seducing these women randomly. If he had to like do it to make the mission happen, and you could have a like character moment where he realizes that he has to do this, maybe then I would feel differently. But it's just like this, like almost like romantic comedy, just silliness of Bond just like sneaking out of his room and into these women's suites. It's just, yeah,
and
doesn't
using the same lines.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny, but it doesn't merge well with the romance that hangs over this movie.
Hey, there's no ring on the finger. She ain't locked that down, my friend. It's all to play for.
Yeah, maybe she's up to some adventures herself, so who knows?
Yeah. I can believe that Diana Rigg is a woman who knows what she wants.
Definitely.
I want to talk about Tracy, but you just give me a moment to talk about one of my weirdest funny moments of the film, which is just, Sir Hilary Bray as a character. But the whole, like, jumping around from bedroom to bedroom, reciting the lines to each girl, and, like, the whole, they thought he was gay and then he's bisexual. I just think that's a really fascinating little tidbit to the film. Like, I don't usually like women, but I'll make an exception for you, and you're so wonderful in the firelight. And I just what a strange choice. And I don't know why being intelligent and talking about golden balls on a crest makes you sound homosexual to these women, but I don't know where they got the vibe that he was gay from. I never really picked up on that.
Maybe more like a stuffy academic. Yeah, I know, it's weird, right?
Yeah.
I also don't get the moment where he like lifts up his kilt or whatever, and she says it's true. I was like, wait, what has he said that would imply me to think of something that's true?
Wait. You don't know what that means?
I'll explain that.
What does it mean?
That he's a true Scotsman.
Yeah.
Oh, like he didn't wear underwear?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the whole. That was my intro line.
Oh.
Okay, that's it. Like, he wasn't wearing underwear. I assume that's what they meant anyway, unless he was talking about the golden balls still.
That's where I got confused because he was talking about having 4 golden balls, and I'm like, I don't want to know.
oh, Hilly.
Yeah.
But back to Tracy. I think we should give her proper time. Has anyone else got anything to add about Tracy?
Yeah, I like how she's a character. And when I say a character, I think you read so often about upcoming films where they're going to have the strong female character and they're going to have a badass female character, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think a lot of times that's talk. You get the talk, but they don't actually deliver on it. Whereas Tracy is an actual fully rounded character. She's not just a competent ass kicker. I mean, she is, but I like that there's more to her than that. She's flawed and she's a bit messed up and she's bratty and she's independent, but she's codependent. She's stubborn, but she's loyal. She's got all these different shades to her, and it just makes her fascinating. And I've grown to like Spectre over the last few years, but I've never really bought the relationship between Madeline and Bond in that film. I don't buy that he would fall in love with her in that film, or even vice versa. But with Tracy in this film, I completely 100% believe that Bond would fall in love with her in the way that he does, in the way that it progresses throughout the movie. I mean, at first he's attracted to her and he maybe just sees her as another conquest, another notch on his bedpost. But as they get to know each other, and he sees, oh, she can drive a car really fast. Oh, she's a brilliant skier. Oh, she's actually quite loyal. Oh, she's here for me when I need her. Oh, I can rely on her. All these things stack up throughout the film, and when Bond is falling in love with her, you, as a viewer, kind of are too in a way. I just think it just shows you don't need a silly name for a Bond girl. You don't need her to come out with these double entendres. You need something like Tracy, who's a proper character. I mean, you can't have it every film, of course. You can't have Bond falling in love every film and having his wife killed every film, because it wouldn't have the same impact. But she's if you have to list the five best things about this film, I think most people would have her as one of the strong points.
Absolutely.
Surely,
Yeah.
I mean, Shayla, you said that she's probably your top Bond girl now, looking after revisiting this film. But I suppose I'm curious what you look for. You're the only woman in the room. What is it you're looking for to make a successful Bond girl? What sort of characteristics? What what in the script are you looking for? What do you gravitate towards?
I suppose I like it when they can hold their own. Like I really like Natalia as well, and I love Wei Lin. But I actually I've asked myself this question, and I do kind of find it hard to answer because on the flip side, I also love Solitaire and like some of the other Bond girls that are maybe not as like badass or Bond's equal. But I guess I kind of lean more towards just being able to hold their own. I like when they have their own story where like Tracy has her own story. You know, she's going through losing her husband who just killed himself, and like she meets Bond, and then they fall in love and everything, and she has her own identity, I guess, outside of Bond, and that, I guess I like that about Natalia as well. She has her own separate mission, but I'm kind of all over the map with Bond girls.
Um, yeah, I think we could sit here all day and just pile on the good credits and the compliments towards Diana Rigg, and I think she did a fantastic job just in the performance, let alone just what was written for her. I think she brought a lot of gravitas to the role, and I think lifted the material.
Definitely.
Hmm.
But I suppose in terms of the only like left, I haven't really chucked one on. I just want to have a shout out to, because I was going to mention the soundtrack, but Stephen mentioned that earlier, and it is a fantastic, fantastic soundtrack. The other thing was just the cinematography in this film.
Yeah.
It's visually a feast. And another one of those elements, I think they had to really up their game just to sort of maybe balance off the Lazenby of it all. I mean, there's a scene where the final assault on Peace Gloria, where they're flying in with the helicopters, and there's like a sunrise in the background. And I mean, that's absolutely gorgeous. And watching it on Blu-ray now, I hope to see a 4K transfer of this film at some point. And I imagine it even looks even more stunning. It's just an exquisite and a gorgeous looking film.
I always love the shot of all the skiers going over the top of the hill. That one always looks incredible near the end when it's Blofeld leading the Spectre goons. And just, I mean, kind of jumping off of that visually, like the action in this movie often looks absolutely phenomenal, whether it's the bobsled chase or that assault on Piz Gloria there at the end, which obviously Christopher Nolan loved a lot when you watch Inception and see that he was clearly trying to evoke that sequence. Like, this is a movie that's wall-to-wall action. We've seen action in every Bond movie before this, but it feels like we're elevating what we can do, and just the visual style, the cinematography of it really just draws so much out of it. I mean, that nighttime ski chase as well is incredible.
Well, I think then what we'll do is we'll maybe throw it out to dislikes in the group. Any sort of quibbles people might have. Let's go with Stephen first. What have you got in terms of a dislike or a quibble about the film you haven't brought up already?
Yeah, a couple of quibbles. I find the whole brainwashing plot is ridiculous. Using attractive allergy sufferers to unleash a bioweapon. It just feels like it belongs. Maybe ridiculous is the wrong word. Maybe it belongs in a different film. When you listen to Peter Hunt and everyone talk about this film, they always say how they wanted to bring things back down to earth and be a bit more grounded. And the film does that. And it's got this lovely love story, and they kind of got rid of the gadgets a bit. But so for me, that aspect of the film just doesn't hang with all the other stuff. Another thing, when I was young, I was just as pedantic as I am now. I could never ever watch the Incredible Hulk cartoon and figure out how he got his shirt back when he turned back into a human. That always bothered me. I just thought, how does his shirt go back, Mum? That does not make sense. So yeah, when I was young, I could not understand for the life of me how Blofeld didn't recognise Bond. I would say to my mum and dad over and over, they just met in the previous film, and my dad would just try and placate me and say, "Oh, he's got glasses on, he's got a pipe," and I'm like, "Dad, this Blofeld would know." I mean, we are, as adults and Bond nerds now, we know the answer is that they wanted to adapt on Her Majesty's, and they just thought, okay, it's the only way we can do it. So that niggles me a little bit, but not too much. One of the things that bothers me is something I never hear mentioned about this film. Why does Bond just leave Blofeld hanging by a branch at the end of the film? the previous scenes have shown that Bond will chase him anywhere. You know, at the start of the film, he resigns because he's not being allowed to pursue Blofeld anywhere, and then he'll get in a bobsleigh and chase him down this bobsleigh track. But then Blofeld gets stuck in a branch, and Bond just pisses off to have a glass of brandy with a big dog.
Yeah, he makes like a quip about it, the same way he does like the guy who falls into the grinder thing. You know, it's like, I'm sorry, like
He had lots of guts.
yeah, it's like if this was like someone he was desperate to track down, he would want a confirmed kill just as a professional. Like he's an assassin for, you know, working for the government. You want to be able to confirm that like their greatest adversary is dead.
Yeah, so part of me, when Tracy gets shot, I'm thinking, well, Bond, you know, you should have finished off what you started there, mate, by your own fault. No, it's just an odd moment. I'd never noticed it before, and when I watched it a few months ago, I thought, you know what, he just leaves Blofeld there. That's weird. Why doesn't he go back for him? Because he could have. It's surely just a little walk up a hill to find him. Odd moment.
I do like that he's branched off quip. I thought that was funny.
It's a pretty good one. Pretty good one.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say just about the hypnosis. It feels very 60s camp, doesn't it? Like everything there, and the movie almost doesn't care about it because you get to them, they just kind of hand wave, oh, don't worry, we've stopped that, don't worry, it's fine. Like they don't even check in with any of those women.
The shot of Irma Bunt's face when Bond looks up and she's above him in bed is nightmare fuel. No matter how many times I see that. It's like that horrible moment in, you know, in the Fellowship of the Rings when Bilbo goes to touch the ring and his face turns black for a moment. It's just one of those moments that I could have seen the film 100 times and I jump out of my skin every time. Oh,
I'm going to put those two pictures together now on Twitter and put it up just for you, just to haunt you with it.
I mean, she is not a picture and she does not look twice as lovely. Or whatever it is. I've said that, but I did watch the documentary about this Inside on Her Majesty's Secret Service, and she was a very attractive young woman. I was very surprised.
Yeah, and she was really close with the girls too. Like they all were very, very close, and they were all like knitting together and what have you. Yeah.
Something else about Bond fandom that I find weird is it's just generally accepted that that Tracy was killed by Blofeld, and no, she wasn't. Blofeld was driving the car. Blofeld was an accessory. It was Bunt that killed her.
I did like the fact that he was in a neck brace, though. I guess a bonus point.
Yeah.
He has to like kind of awkwardly
Have it
turn to
Mary
the
on.
side to look.
Well, like here's a question: is Irma Bunt Bond's greatest adversary? Like, if anyone, I mean, she got away. She committed like the worst thing humanly possible against him, and she got away with it.
It's a good point.
It's entirely possible. She's a crack shot as well. That's a moving car, and she managed to make that headshot. So fair play to her.
Yeah, I think they were planning to work in Irma Bunt in an earlier draft of Spectre, and then cut her because the movie was already too busy. But I would love to see that character back in some way.
She has a real air of menace in this film. Like whenever she appears, you believe she's Blofeld's number two.
Mm-hmm.
You believe that he trusts her, that she gets stuff done. I love how matronly she is with all the girls. You know, the fun just stops when she turns up. You're having steak and you're going to listen to his boring stories about plaques. That's it. That's what your dinner is, ladies. Deal with it.
I always had Irma down as like a lesser Rosa Klebb.
I feel like you could completely see it that way, and I would totally understand. I think they give her enough that I'm able to differentiate between the two. But it's kind of like all too often, you know, they go to like the blonde henchman dude who works for Spectre as well, or like the villain. And I feel like that's a little bit of the same case here. It's just that to me, she has enough personality to feel a little different.
Wait, hang on. Can we name the blonde henchman? So we have not just Spectre, but in Bond, we have Stamper.
Stamper.
You got
is it Necros in
Necros.
Yep.
Yeah.
You got
name more
Hans.
Red Grant.
Hans,
Ultimate.
and You Only Live Twice.
Hans. Yep.
And the one that I can never remember the name of
What about
is the
Red
one.
Grant? He's got the blonde hair.
Yeah, Red Grant.
yeah.
It's the one in For Your Eyes Only, whose name I always forget.
Kriegler, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
boom.
Kriegler.
Sure.
There you
I'm
go.
taking your word for it. I believe that you are accurate.
The 5 blonde henchmen of the apocalypse. Perfect. Shayla, what's a dislike for you?
I think the main dislike for me was the same as Stephen, which would be like the brainwashing. It's a little bit less believable. But that being said, I definitely close my eyes during Ruby's therapy just to see if I'll end up loving chickens by the end of it. Hasn't happened yet, but you never know. So I don't know. Maybe Blofeld needs to go back to work on his therapy because it doesn't work on me. But that would be the biggest one, I guess, would be the brainwashing.
What would you go to Blofeld to have cured?
Oh my goodness. Mm. Perhaps my addiction to chocolate. Maybe we'll just lessen it a little bit, like I don't need to love it this much.
Well, throw out to the rest of you guys. Stephen, what would you go to get cured at Blofeld's Peace Glory Academy?
That is an excellent question. Maybe my addiction to Bond, so I could get more stuff done and not watch For Your Eyes Only 4 times a month.
What do you mean? It's what, quarter to midnight here in the UK, and you're up talking about Bond? That's perfectly normal, right?
Yeah, no, that's good. Maybe my addiction to pasta. Yeah,
Yum.
there's one for you.
These are all food-based so far. Cam, what have you got?
I'm trying to think. I'm actually really good in that I'm not really addicted to anything in my life, but
Oh, here we go. Humble brag.
I know it's true. It's true. But I think the one thing I really do battle against is an addiction to Coke Zero. That is the one thing that I
You
am.
love Coke Zero.
I do. I really do. And I don't drink at all. And so it's like my only joy is Coke Zero. So it's like, please don't take it away from me.
He means that literally. That is his only joy in life. It's
Yeah.
all he has left.
Actually, I've rethought my answer. Can I give you a separate answer?
Yeah.
No. No, go on.
I would I would potentially, and I have to think about this, but I would potentially have all the knowledge of all the Bond films removed so I could watch them again for the first time.
Ooh.
Oh.
That's a good one.
Now, the reason I say that is
Especially Casino Royale 67.
yeah. I am. You know, when I was talking earlier about how when I was younger I watched them so many times that they lost meaning. I did this weird thing when I was a student. I used to just use Bond quotes just all through life in inappropriate scenarios. They would just pop out. I wouldn't really know they were coming, and I'll give you one a quick example. So I had a sort of slight asthma attack one day, and I had to get a taxi to the chemist to get an inhaler. And as the door was opening, the taxi driver asked me where I wanted to go, and I said, "Oh, the nearest pharmacy, please." Oh, and did that turned into Roger from The Man with the Golden Gun for a second, and part of my brain just said to me, "Not now. You're almost having an asthma attack. There is no time for this nonsense."
You're literally dying, man. We can stop now.
Yeah. And also the taxi driver didn't get it. He just looked at me like, "What was that?" So yeah, I'd maybe remove that stuff because it's
I think for me, just to finish it off, I would probably take away my crippling need to be validated by everyone. I clearly need everyone's affection, and that's why I have a podcast. So
Yeah, you'll always get everyone's affection when you review movies on a podcast.
yeah, people love me.
Yeah.
There's already one fatwa out against me. So yeah.
Yeah.
And we recently had a verbal podcast rebuttal against us, Cam. So we must be doing quite well.
That's right. Can't complain.
Okay, Cam, a dislike / quibble.
We've touched on the things that kind of bother me, like the stuff with him kind of flirting with the women when the Tracy relationship is so strong in the movie. But the one scene that every time I watch it, it's kind of like I mentally check out is the escape from like the engine room where he has to, crawl across the cables while the cable car's coming after him. But all the lead up to that, I always find a little bit slow. Like I'm like, just get to the ski sequence. That's where the excitement is.
I think that's fair enough. It's as close as we're going to get to where Eagles dare in the film.
Yeah.
That bit does kind of bog for me. I also find the stuff at the race course maybe a bit slow, and the little romance montage they have.
Oh, you see, well, I don't know. Like once you like pipe in the music, I'm just sign me up. I'm good to go.
That's fair. The only thing I had left that hadn't been mentioned already was, and this is just it being a product of its time. It's not really a big deal. It's just sort of the weird way that Draco talks about the mental illness side of things at the start.
Yeah.
Very dismissive of the whole thing and how she really just needs a man to calm her down and like F you for a start.
Yeah.
But I understand this was made in the 60s, so I can compartmentalize my issue with it. But, you know, that's very much an old guard sort of mentality. But then I think Lazenby signifies a sort of new emotional side of Bond that's coming through, whereas Draco is meant to be this. Well, I said the old guard, but that sort of encapsulation of what came before. And Lazenby's meant to be this revitalized way because he treats Teresa, he treats Tracy very well, apart from a couple of bits and bobs. But yeah, I think he's a lot nicer to women than Draco is. So you're meant to draw that distinction.
Yeah, I'd actually forgotten how much Bond rebuffs suggestions of Draco's. Like my memory was more that they were somewhat on the same page, but pretty much everything Draco suggests Bond is not really along with. Like he doesn't agree to. And that I actually appreciated walking out of the movie, was like, huh. That actually made me think a little higher of the Lazenby Bond, because there are problematic elements of, Bond in the 60s. I mean, shocker of all shockers, but that part didn't grate on me the way I thought it might.
No. Well, okay, before we go to the naughty or nice list at the end here, I guess we'll just throw out to like any quick notes or questions. I have one question. Well, I actually have two questions, but I'll throw the first one out and I'll come back with the other one later. We spoke about what if Sean was in this film. The question I had, and we don't have to dig into too much, but would you rather have had Sean or Roger in this film instead of Lazenby if you had to pick?
Ooh.
Who would you rather have seen in the role?
Between those two?
Between those two, yeah. We won't include Dalton because he was way too young at that point.
Yeah.
Shayla?
Wow. Both. I would like to see both. But if I had to choose just one, I think it would be really cool to see Roger actually. Especially where, like if Sean was like super over it and didn't want to continue with Bond anymore or like wouldn't have given his all to the emotional depth that the story needed. I think it'd be cool to see Roger.
I think Roger could pull off the delicate stuff, especially the end scene with Tracy.
Yeah, totally.
He also, if you're going to have him doing those scenes at the allergy clinic with these various women, like Roger would have pulled that off seamlessly, like the light comedy aspects.
Yeah, totally.
Stephen?
Yeah, if we had a motivated Connery, that would be my choice. But now that you guys have mentioned Roger, and I'm picturing him as Sir Hilary Bray, and I can't picture anything else. Just him with the pipe alone would have been worth an extra star rating. See, my view on Roger is that I think he's good in all the films he's in, all the Bond films. I think he's watchable and entertaining from the start. My personal thing with Roger is I think he grows into the role and sort of finds his feet a little bit. In the first couple, he's maybe caught between Sean and trying out some things, and then I really like his performances when he's a little bit older. But so thinking of him as a young Bond in this film, it's tough because he's known as the funny Bond and the humorous Bond, and he can do the light comedy like that. But I think Roger's really good at the serious stuff. He doesn't get enough credit for the serious stuff. He has lots of little moments through his run that were really good. So I think he would have pulled off the crucial scene with Tracy at the end, and that would have been a weird one, seeing Roger fall in love.
When he does it well.
Yeah, it's just that they were never interested in giving him that kind of material. You get the moments throughout his run where something will like hit a nerve with him, and you'll get that kind of reaction from him, that kind of like wounded reaction, and I kind of would like to have seen that here. I think like for me, Roger Moore is like the fun experiment. Like I would love to see that movie, but just for like the continuity of it all, like seeing Connery in this movie, especially if they made this one after Goldfinger or at least before You Only Live Twice, that could have been really incredible to see for sure.
Shayla, do you have any sort of final notes before we wrap up?
I do. I have one cool little factoid, I guess.
Let's go.
Apparently, right? So apparently it was George's idea for a cliff jump with the parachute, but they couldn't do it at that time, so they saved it for The Spy Who Loved Me.
Oh,
I think that's really cool. Yeah, it was on IMDb, so I hope, or IMDb, so hopefully it's true. But I just thought that was really, really cool.
that is awesome. Yeah, I didn't stumble across that one.
And I can certainly see him being up for physically doing it too. It's the sort of thing I can see Lazenby be like, yeah, I'll do it.
Makes sense too, because John Glenn was there, so John Glenn was maybe writing in his notebook, cliff
Yeah, he's
jump,
like saving
parachute.
that.
I'll do that later, because I know he didn't. I know he before anyone writes in. I know he didn't direct The Spy Who Loved Me, but he shot the scene where Bond parachutes
Yeah.
off the cliff.
Yeah, that's a really good one there, Shayla. Nice one.
Thank you.
Stephen, any final notes?
Yeah, I think I'm worried that people will listen to this podcast and think that I don't like this film as much as I do, because I really do. For me, it's a film of moments and scenes. I think I go through it and I don't think it's a 10 out of 10 all the way through, but I think it's a film that just suddenly just hits these incredible real peaks of what I would call peak Bond. It's littered with all these really nice little small touches. There's so many. Just trying to think of one off the top of my head, like when Bond grabs Tracy's wrist when she's pointing the gun at him.
Yes.
In the hotel room, he just does it so quickly, and the film's got all these nice little details, like Bond's eyes don't shift from her. He doesn't look at the gun; he's looking at her the whole time. And little moments like that I love, because they tell you a lot about Bond's character, that he's ready, he's efficient when he needs to be. And talking about peak Bond, you asked me earlier on for an example of scenes that I like. Another one that for me is right up there is when Bond is escaping Piz Gloria. Just from when he puts the guy in the cupboard, and he's just, all he's doing really is walking from along a corridor to the end of the building and putting on some skis. It's just majestic. Every time I watch it, I get goosebumps with that sort of saxy music from and then it kicks into the full dun, 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 dun. Just brilliant stuff, just peak Bond. So when I watch this film back now, I can absolutely see why modern Bond creators and writers would want to go back. I'm not saying they should have went back, but I can see why Chris Nolan would rip off this film. I can see why No Time to Die would think, yeah, that's a film we want to be influenced by. It seems to have had a renaissance, this film, in the last 10 years. When I was growing up, it was something that was not talked about.
Mm-hmm.
When I was young, it was Connery's Bond, Roger's the silly one, and this Dalton guy is rubbish. I never agreed with those, by the way. That's just the attitudes that I encountered when I was younger from other Bond fans. But this film wasn't even in the conversation when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that, speaking to Bond fans and Bond nerds now, that it's so loved. It did puzzle me at first, I have to say. A couple of years ago, when I still wasn't up on this film, I couldn't see what everyone else was seeing. And to read them saying, "Oh yes, it's in my top 3," and I would just think, what? Above Roger tossing a plastic nipple in the bushes, you'd rather watch this. You'd rather watch this than Roger with his 9-foot cigar fighting Christopher Lee. But now I get it. I totally get what all the hype is about. It's just that thing that we were talking about earlier that you've all mentioned. It's that part of my brain that's thinking, what would this have been like with Peak Sean? If Peak Sean was up for it, how good could this have been? Because Lazenby is good in this for a non-actor. He's really solid, and he gets a hard time from some people who criticize his acting, and we've all 4 of us have done that tonight. There are scenes in this that you can watch and say he's not very good in that scene, but when you stop and think, the guy wasn't an actor. So that's like any one of us, all 4 of us non-actors. Could you imagine walking onto a Bond set tomorrow and carrying an entire production? It's unthinkable. So I think he does deserve credit, and I feel bad for my mind consistently thinking, how would Sean have played this scene? What would Sean have brought to that scene? How would Dalton have played that scene? But I think isn't that part and parcel of being a Bond fan? Don't we do that all the time? Don't we watch?
I think that's only natural. I don't think it's something to be apologetic for at all. I think it's just something that we all do. We've all tried to put, Pierce Brosnan in Casino Royale.
Yeah,
we've all wondered about that. There's nothing wrong with that. I agree with you actually, Stephen. I think we might have sounded like none of us liked this film because we've critiqued it, but we have said a lot of things we liked about the film too. And ultimately, I mean, as I said, for me, Lazenby is the flaw that holds this film back from potentially being, if not Casino Royale, like at least the number 2 in terms of all Bond films. But that's what we do with these films. We discuss them ad nauseum on Twitter with each other, and find new things that we love and find new things that bother us every time we rewatch it. But I think that's the beautiful thing about Bond, is that we can jump and genre hop from 1969 trippy Bond films to like Casino Royale, Daniel Craig running through a wall, but they're all in the same film series, and that's something to be celebrated.
Yeah, and I think like with Lazenby, you just wish he'd done one or two more. Because then you could really just look at that era. Whereas when you have just the one single one, then you are tempted to say, well, what if Connery was in this? What if Moore was in this? Because it can be so easily erased when it's one movie. But had he done a trilogy even, you probably wouldn't say that.
Good point.
Well, what about you, Cam? Any final notes?
I've got a few I'll just tick off here. Bond sliding on ice is the greatest thing ever. So I have that.
Absolutely.
We have, I think, first Know-It-All Bond, where M is doing the Lepidotry or whatever it's called with the butterflies, and Bond gets in there and starts just like outsmarting him. That's something we'll see a lot of going forward. I know it's in Diamonds Are Forever, but Moore was a master of that as well. I love that moment. The scientists throwing a beaker at the people at the end when they're breaking into the compound is incredible. I would like to know what's going on there. And the blonde helper dude that Bond has, I liked how he never really speaks that much. Just like this guy doing stuff in the background. Not something we see usually. Usually they have some sort of personality or some sort of character to them. I like that this guy's just working in the background and is just a visual. And then just lastly, the guy who falls off the cliff.
Beautiful.
That dummy falling for like 30 seconds is incredible. We need more things like that in Bond movies. Please, more dummies being thrown off cliffs.
I personally love dummies being thrown off cliffs, so I couldn't agree with you more, Cam.
Yeah, it's incredible.
The only thing I had left then to mention was, and Stephen's mentioned this a couple of times, was the score. But I just want to talk about the Louis Armstrong song. Because I think this is the only Bond song to transcend the quote-unquote being a Bond song. This is so good that it is just a great song. I mean, it's the only one out of the 25 that I often hear on the radio. I mean, I'll hear like, I don't know, The Living Daylights, For Your Eyes Only, a couple more from time to time. But all the time in the world is on constantly on radio stations in the UK. And I think it just transcends.
Yeah, and you don't have like a traditional Bond song in the credits here. You just have, the score, which is incredible. But this, Louis Armstrong song is kind of the official Bond song in many ways of this movie.
It's also one people wouldn't know as a Bond song.
Yeah.
And that's the magic of it compared to something like, GoldenEye or Goldfinger, for instance. People know that's to do with a Bond film, whereas people haven't seen this film. And so when they hear it in this film, they think, oh, they just used it for the film. But no, this is the Bond song for the film.
Is this the only Bond song to be played in 2 movies?
Oh.
We've had snippets, like you've got, as we referred to earlier, the janitor whistling, a little bit of Goldfinger, but I think this is it.
You got Mango Tree as well at the start of this.
Yeah.
When he's like looking at all of his old stuff, you can hear underneath the mango tree.
You hear a little snippet of Live and Let Die in The Man with the Golden Gun when when Sheriff Pepper sees Bond, but that's not the full song. That's just a tiny little do-do-do-do-do-do.
Yeah, they'll put little like cues because they do that, when he's going through his, his various souvenirs from past missions in this movie where you're hearing the Thunderball score and stuff like that. But you very rarely get a full song played twice.
I think you might be right there, Cam.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll put it out to you guys. If anyone else at home knows the one that we're missing, let us know on Twitter. Yeah, I just think this is an outstanding song. And if anything, No Time to Die upped my love for this song. I mean, it probably was overused in No Time to Die, but I could listen to all the time in the world and the On Her Majesty's Secret Service score anytime.
Yeah, and actually they did bring back the title music from this movie and played a little snippet of it in No Time to Die. Very weird scene where it's just Bond talking to M, but nonetheless, it's there.
Wasn't there some of this film's music in the trailer for Spectre?
Yes.
Yep.
A slowed down version of the theme was. And I'm sad because you can't get it anywhere, or I've never come across it. I would love to have it to be able to listen to it all the time because it sounds incredible.
We have to raid the Eon archives.
Yeah.
That's got to be out there, right? They couldn't have hidden it away.
I don't know. I haven't found it yet. If anybody can find it, send it my way.
There you go. Shayla's put the gauntlet down now. We have to find it. That's our goal. Rightio, guys. It's that magic time. Naughty or nice is on Her Majesty's Secret Service making the knock list. We have 4 votes this week. It could go either way. By the sounds of it, there's mixed opinions on the film. Shayla, I'm going to put you on the hot seat. You're up first.
So for me, I'm going to say yes, it needs to go on the knock list because it is so underrated, and I think it needs to be seen and people need to give it a shot. So I think it deserves to be on the list for that.
Okay, I think that's fair. Stephen, what about you?
Yeah, for me, an easy yes. This film has the gadgets and it knows how to use them. What I would say is if you're one of those Bond fans who's on the fence about this film, if you're not really keen on it, then I would urge you to try it and rewatch it a few times, which is what I did, and I've ended up loving it. And I'm so glad that I did. Because I think with some films, you don't like them and you're not really bothered that you don't like them. But with some films, you watch them and there's a part of you thinking, I want to like this film. You know, everyone's raving about this film. What are they seeing that I'm not? I want to appreciate this film as much as they do. And I made it a mission to fall in love with this film. And I'm so glad that I did. So if you're on the fence, if you can't see past certain aspects of it, just give it a try. Every now and then. Christmas is coming up. It's the perfect Bond Christmas film.
It is.
Yeah, that is exactly why we're here. And Cam, I mean, it could go either way still. You hold the key vote now. For once, you hold the key vote. So, yay or nay on Her Majesty's Secret Service?
It's a big yes for me. I usually rank this one, honestly, about number 2 or number 3 when I'm doing Bond rankings. So it's not necessarily a surprise for me to say yes to this one. And I mean, I love sort of those outlier Bond films, the ones that feel a little bit different from those around. And sometimes those are bummers, you know, when you're watching like Casino Royale 67 or Never Say Never Again or something like that. You're like, well, you know, I know I'm going to watch them again, but I'm not getting fireworks out of this one. Whereas like this movie, because it's, you know, Lazenby's only film, it feels tonally very different than most of the movies around it. It kind of feels like a little bit of an outlier, but it's one that I can just watch over and over again. I refer to Thunderball as like my hangout Bond movie, but like this one kind of fits the bill in the same way, but just with a heightened level of technical mastery. And just as the pinnacle of Peter Hunt's probably association with Bond. Obviously, this is his like sole directing effort with the Bond franchise, and just from what I've seen, seems to be the best directed film he ever made. So I think just in tribute to Peter Hunt, big yes.
Well, it's inevitable now, I guess. Whatever I say is usually useless in general, but definitely useless this week. I'm gonna go with a soft no.
Ooh.
Controversially.
Ooh.
I love everything about this film except for Bond, and I just can't get past it. And trust me, I've watched this film. And Stephen, I get what you said. Like, if you're hung up on it, give it another watch. I don't not watch this film. I keep trying. Maybe I haven't hit the magic, 9th watch to really get on board with George Lazenby, but I'm still on the ropes, and he just doesn't do it for me when I need him to. And everything else about this film is perfect. I love Tracy, love it. I love Piz Gloria. I love the cinematography. I love the music. I could talk about it for hours, and frankly, we have. But I just can't get past Bond, and so I would probably and I voted for You Only Live Twice to go onto the knock list, and I think I would rather watch that than this.
Interesting. And I have a question for you. Do you love Telly Savalas in this movie?
I didn't really speak about that. I do love Telly Savalas in this film, I have to say. I think he's a better Blofeld than Donald Pleasance.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, just as a physical equal, he works a lot better. And like Shayla, I love the way he smokes his cigarette. To me, the one thing he's always missing, though, is like kind of some idiosyncratic quirk. The way that like Pleasance has it, or that Christoph Waltz brought to it. Like there's like a little bit of crazy missing from his Blofeld.
Yeah, he does seem to have his shiz together.
His chickens in a row.
Oh yeah,
boom.
Perfect.
Yeah. Although his plan of like becoming a count by like taping back his earlobes or whatever is insane. So maybe that's the crazy.
Yeah, we didn't really get into the whole like checking if he's a count and actually performing cosmetic surgery on himself, which is another strange thing about this film that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But I'm glad it's making the knock list because I think it should be on there. I just felt like I had to use my vote to express what I felt about it, really, and mostly because it was pointless. So, but there you go, folks. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is getting on the knock list. Congratulations to George Lazenby. I'm sure he'll be thrilled. Stephen, go ahead.
Can I ask you just a quick question for you there? So you voted a soft no there when you knew that we were all in. What would you have done if there was 5 of us and there was 2 yeses and 2 nos? Would you still have voted no, or would you have went for the yes because you wanted it in there?
It's an absolutely solid question. I'm genuinely surprised Cam didn't ask it. I would have voted yes.
Right.
I'll be honest. I think there's a lot of. I said it. There's so much great about this film, except for Bond for me.
Yeah.
And that's what stops it from being in my top 5 now. And not that You Only Live Twice is in my top 5 either. I just find that to be a more enjoyable film to watch than this. But I don't think I would. I don't think I would like it if it wasn't on the knock list. I don't think the knock list would be complete if it was a miss.
See, I completely get where you're coming from. Like what you're saying makes absolute sense to me because you can watch a Bond film and like it despite a bad villain or a duff gangster, henchman, or a Bond girl you don't quite click with. But for someone who doesn't like George in this film or his performance, that's quite a big barrier. I totally get that because it's Bond. He's the center of the movie. He's the anchor, and if you can't get past him, I totally understand why you would feel that way if you're not with him. Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Which is a shame because I really love frilly shirts
and kilts.
And kilts. Yeah, I love kilts. Well, there you go, folks. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is officially going on the nice list, and it is not receiving a lump of coal this Christmas. Well, Cam, before we wrap up, I want to say thank you to our wonderful guests. Shayla, Stephen, thank you both for taking the time to join us and celebrate Christmas with us over here on SpyHards. Shayla, you first. Where can people find more from you?
I have a YouTube show called Sweet Time with Shayla and Chelsea, so you can go to sweettimeshow.com if you want to check that out. We just do like fun crafts and just like what do we do? I don't even know. Just mostly crafts, I guess, and like
hang
music
out.
stuff.
You
Yeah, we just
chill.
hang out.
Yeah.
We have fun. We try to make people laugh. And then if you want to come talk to me, I'm on Twitter under Shayla, ShayLayy. Yeah.
You can actually find a link to that below under the t-shirt that's in the Redbubble store, which Shayla designed.
Oh, yes. So what does Vargas do?
Mm-hmm.
We've still not figured it out many months post. And Stephen, where can people find more from you?
Just before I answer that question, Shayla, was your Sweet Time, is it named after that immense show from the 90s, Sweet Valley High, with the greatest theme tune of all time? Is that why? Is there any link there?
No, I just thought it was a cute name because like I want people to spend their sweet time with us. So Sweet Time with Shayla and Chelsea. Thank you for
okay.
spending your sweet time with us, you know?
Got you, right, okay. Do any of you guys know Sweet Valley High? Do anyone remember it? No?
I've never seen it, but I know what it is, yeah.
I'm the same as Cam.
Yeah.
I've never seen it, but I know what it is.
I've never seen it, nor do I know what it is.
It was this really naff teen show in the 90s with 2 twins, and one was smart and one was the school hottie, and it was rubbish, but if you were a young teenager, you watched it, and it had this really addictive theme song, and I don't know why I'm talking about it right now.
It's clearly midnight here in the UK. Stephen and I are slowly drifting to sleep, so it's a perfect time to wrap up. But Stephen, where can people find more from you?
I'm on the BBC Radio Scotland every month or so reviewing films, and if you want to find me on Twitter, I'm just going to have to look up because I can't remember my own handle. It is at The Naked Pun. If you like cringy Bond memes that someone else will then reuse a month later and get 5 times the likes and retweets, come and find me there.
The amount of times. That's why I've started putting our logo on stuff now. It's ridiculous.
It happens. Occupational hazard.
You just see him on Twitter and you see him on like Facebook a month later. It's so silly.
It is what it is.
But no, I recommend following both Shayla and Stephen. Stephen's memes are legendary on Bond Twitter, so absolutely legendary for being awful. Don't worry.
Yes.
But thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. The radioactive lint is in the post.
Did that ever get resolved?
No.
Strange moment.
No. Well, there you go, folks. On Her Majesty's Secret Service has made the knock list, and as such, the dossier on the film is complete and filed as classified. But Cam, what are we doing next week?
Yes, we have a special interview with Yvonne Zima, who played Gina Davis's daughter in The Long Kiss Goodnight. We are not doing a regular episode next week because of Christmas and what have you, but we are not going to leave you guys empty-handed. The stocking will be attended to. You will have an interview, and it's a darn good one.
Yeah, we thought we'd keep the Christmas cheer going, and Yvonne was really gracious with her time. We had at least an hour where we chatted all about working with Samuel L. Jackson, working with Gina Davis, and it's a really wonderful chat, so we're hoping you guys will enjoy it. And then we'll be back in the new year with a very special episode.
That's right.
There you go, folks. Well, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to join us next week as we speak to Yvonne Zimmer. If you want to support the show, check us out on patreon.com/SpyHards, where you can find our exclusive Agents in the Field episodes where we tackle the non-spy movies of our favourite spy actors, as well as our monthly film commentaries. We've just had our GoldenEye film commentary drop, and I believe we have a new one coming in a couple of weeks, Cam.
Yes, the Ipcris file is coming soon.
I didn't love the film we visited the first time. Maybe it's grown on me on the next viewing. We will find out. You can, of course, find out more about the knock list at letterboxd.com/spyhards. You can find out all the films that made it on and the films that didn't. Do not forget, of course, to follow us discreetly on social media at SpyHards. That's SpyHards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But until next week, listeners, we have all the time in the world.